For tonight's review, I would like to present to you the Halloween Tarot deck. Now, many people would just call this another Rider-Waite clone. And for most part, they'd be right. They have the Fool card and the Magician, and the rest of the deck is largely set up just like any other Rider-Waite tarot. The biggest difference, of course, with our Halloween tarot deck is the fact that our suits aren't standard suits. You have the pumpkin, the ghost, the bat, and the imp. Those are the 4 different suits in the Halloween tarot. Now, this version that I have for the Halloween tarot is simply the more deluxe version. It is done by US Games Systems Incorporated. And instead of just being the deck, you have a box that includes both a large booklet as well as the deck and box. So, between the 2 books here, you have the simpler, smaller white book, which is pretty standard among every tarot deck, that fits, of course, inside the box. And then you have the larger book, which has a foreword that isn't actually all that small, to be honest. This whole section of the book here is a little bit of a conversation about the history of Halloween. And then you actually get into a deeper insight into the cards themselves and descriptions with black and white photos of each card. Now, it's the beginning of autumn, early September, September 4th. And I can't help but think of Halloween. So maybe this review is a bit ahead of time. It's not exactly seasonal yet, but I can't help but get excited about having Halloween come for us. Every year, I get super excited. The reason that I bought this deck in the first place, and this is one of my decks that I use quite frequently, is because I love and adore the artwork. When I was little, this style of artwork was all over all kinds of Halloween books and whatnot that we had from our scholastic books in elementary school. So this sort of cartoonish, over the top, but still spooky was just the style that was everywhere, and I loved it. I think that Kipling did a fantastic job when he made this deck. And let me give a little explanation of who made this. So the deck was designed by Karen Lee, but the art is by Kipling West. And let me tell you, I absolutely just love everything about it. Mostly, tarot decks are serious. You've got lots of symbolism and sometimes graphic, bloody images. One of my previous decks had naked women. So they're not really kid-friendly in the respect that the images and some of the themes are a bit adult. So I adore this deck because I want occasionally to do a reading for either friends or maybe people who are younger, people who are in their teens, that doesn't have that sort of heightened, over the top, mystic, nudity, gore, scary feel to it. But I still want that sort of spooky atmosphere. And that's why I absolutely adore this deck. You still have all of the basic symbolism that you would have in a Rider-Waite tarot deck, but it's softened in a way so that things are just a little bit easier to read and honestly more fun to read. I think that the times that this deck comes out is usually when I want to know what's going on, but I don't want it to hit home so hard. I want to see what's going on without being blinded by it. And I know some people would think that that would be, I don't know, foolish. If you want truth from the spirits, from the cards, then something that softens that in any way, shape, or form would be foolish. But like I said, I'm doing this for somebody who's younger, maybe somebody in their teens, and I have permission from their parents, but maybe they don't want me to use my witch's deck, which has nudity in it. Then this is definitely the deck that I would use with them. I want to talk about the foreword in this book just a little bit first, before I get into the actual deck itself. Now, there's an introduction talking about the author's feel about Halloween, and that's Karen Lee. We could tell the Halloween-friendly people from those who did not indulge. A well-lit front porch was plenty of encouragement for us to scramble up and ring the doorbell like carolers demanding figgy pudding. A coffin on the front door, a hanged man outside a tree, or a jack-o'-lantern on the porch were sure signs of the sweet bounty within. Trick or treat, we'd rout greedily, and hoping our costumes were singled out for praise, but mostly hoping for chocolate. Even though technically trick-or-treating, we'd seldom pre-tricks on people who weren't home or didn't have candy. That's the feel that you get with this. Like, you're dressed up in a costume and you're visiting somebody's house. There's a little bit of excitement. There's a little bit of daring. But at the same time, it's also safe. The second part of the foreword is a history of Halloween. It goes from Celtic Samhain to the dealing with the pagans in the church and the creation of All Hallows Day. Is it All Hallows Day? All Hallows Day, and Halloween became All Hallows Eve. And even makes some speculation, of course, on some of the imagery that Halloween typically has, which is cats, skeletons, discusses the Mexican Day of the Dead, and how that all fits in with what we think of as Halloween. Even discusses some other fortune-telling things that were done that have nothing to do with cards. One being nutcrackers, where you can put two side by side and see if they carefully put them in a bed of coal in the fireplace side by side. If the nut representing your beloved burns quietly and brightly, it indicates sincerity or affection. If it cracks and jumps, it signals infidelity, nervousness, or general crankiness. If the nuts do not burn freely, it's a sign of cold indifference. If the nuts burn together steadily, you may be in for the long haul. Or even an apple paring, where you peeled an entire apple and threw it behind you, and it was supposed to show up as the initials of your beloved to be. Halloween is just a time for divination. So taking a deck, a divination deck, and celebrating Halloween seems so fitting. So I'm going to get into some of the artwork of the actual cards. First and foremost, you've already seen this one. This is the Fool. You have a clown. You've got some balls being juggled overhead, and there's actually one ball on the floor next to his bag, which is the bag is something that is often depicted in the Fool card as being his tricks that he's able to keep with him, or knowledge or whatnot that he carries. And the balls, of course, on top of him represent the 4 elements plus heart, plus a lotus. And on the ground is Uranus, which I think the book says is for like sincerity. Let me double check. I read that earlier. Oh, Uranus, idealism and inspiration. So the symbolism in here is good. You've definitely got all the proper symbolism that you would have in a Fool's card, and maybe a little bit more. Second, of course, we have a magician. We have rabbit pulling out of the hat, kind of a magician. And instead, of course, of having the sword and saves and wands, you've got a ghost and an imp and the pumpkin and the bat, which are the 4 suits of this particular deck. So again, if you take the symbolism that you have from this deck of cards and translate it through the ghost and the pumpkin and the imp and the bat, again, the card has all the symbols that you would normally find. On top of something that ordinary decks don't have. You have a little black cat here, you have a little black cat here. The black cat in this deck follows you throughout the entire deck. It is supposed to be you, person viewing the deck, traveling through it. And it doesn't just stay in the major arcana, it even ends up in the minor arcana, as can be depicted here with the King of Wands and the cat at his feet. And of course the cat is used as a symbol of the deck, the black cat being this beautiful artwork on the back of each card. Then we have here, of course, the High Priestess. She's a vampire, one that comes out at night. Learned, she's got books, and she's got a bat, which represents the swords. And you've got the 2 towers, the pillars of the white and dark pillars, which is again another set of symbolism that you see in the Priestess quite a bit. Here we have the Empress. She is the bride of Frankenstein, and well suited to the Empress card. You've got, again, trees and the dais and a cauldron, and much of the same symbolism that you would normally find in a regular Empress card shows up again. And here we have the Emperor. We have Frankenstein's monster. Everybody typically thinks of the Emperor as being quite stiff and rigid, and I feel like Frankenstein's monster is an exceptional example of that kind of masculinity, stiffness. And then you have the Hierophant. You have a mummy. You've got the stave like normal Hierophant cards would have. He himself has got some Anubis on each side, a lily on one side and roses on the other. much of the same symbolism that you would find in a typical Hierophant card shows up again. This is one of the cards I found most interesting. So instead of what we consider lovers, two people getting together in a traditional deck, you have this lovely maiden here, and then you have a vampire sneaking into her bedroom. Now, I have seen quite a few decks where there's two different people on the card. Most of the time, it's the male that's the focus. But she's got this picture down here of this sort of boring, mundane, sturdy, reliable man that she's writing these letters to, but she's also got this vampire who's interested in her as well. Exciting and dangerous. And I feel like even in the standard deck, there's not this feel, but you see a lot of other tarot decks that like to take the Lover's card and play this sort of sensuality versus reliability, domestic love versus passionate love. I feel like this is probably one of the best, easiest to understand examples that they've had in a deck. And here we have our Chariot. You've got hearse with a pumpkin man driving it. Pumpkins being pentacles, sort of an earthly kind of card. Cat, of course, is a bit terrified that the pumpkin's driving, but, you know, it's a good card. You've got sphinxes like you have in the original Chariot, and overall, there's still a lot of the same symbolism that you would find in a standard Chariot. So, strength, instead of a woman and a lion naked like you usually find, which is one of the cards that I would be sort of remiss to put in front of a kid, you have a lion tamer, which is an excellent example of similar symbolism, but done in a different manner that's a little bit more appealing to maybe a wider audience, and a little bit more understandable. And here we have the Hermit, sort of a mad scientist in his lair, trying to create a pumpkin. Apparently in the corner you can see a pumpkin being stuffed with a brain. And many scientists in movies and whatnot sort of closet themselves up in towers so that they can learn things and study away from the mundane practices of everyday life. So I feel like this sort of mad scientist, mad engineer style is a perfect example of what we would consider similar symbolism, but a different setup. Just like the Strength card, just like the Lover's card. And the Wheel of Fortune, of course, we have sort of this Wheel of Torture, which now looking at it, I've seen somebody else use sort of the Inquisitor's Wheel as the Wheel of Fortune. So unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a lot of good fortune for this particular person, except for, of course, maybe being missed by the knives. But then again, you know, no real positives, no fortune or love or fame in this particular card. But around the edges here, of course, we see the symbols of the zodiac, which can be pretty standard in the Wheel of Fortune card. And here we have Justice. I feel like this Justice card probably one of the weakest ones so far. Just a pumpkin holding scales. It's got a rat and some heads. Now, good card overall, but still, I feel like it's probably one of the weakest cards we have so far. So I'm going to read from that particular one, see what their justification of the symbolism was. Would you put your fate in this creature's hands? That's the spooky side of the law, but the card is more about personal justice, an inner sense of right and wrong we wish everyone already had. All the glowing eyes in the card, count them, 18. Glowing eyes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I count 15. 16, 17. Anyway. All the glowing cards in the eyes communicate that the sight is the main attribute of justice. Standing between the two trees of positively and negative forces is a clear-sighted, pumpkin-headed scarecrow of justice himself, holding a scale weighing 2 shrunken heads against 1 rat. We all strive for balance, but to achieve it, you must eliminate what is excessive, useless, or simply wrong-headed in your life. The owl on the right represents the wisdom of impartial judgment, would agree, as we would the crow to the left, who picks at the carcass of dead animal, therefore eliminating waste and rot. The 2 bats in the upper left corner, good luck in Chinese tradition, counteract the black cat in the lower right-hand corner, bad luck in American superstition. The heart-pierced voodoo doll in the bottom left corner provides a different twist on personal justice, revenge, in the honor of Halloween. This card also may signify the desire for education with a well-balanced mind as its objectives. It calls to mind the Scarecrow and the Wizard of Oz, who so earnestly wanted to find a brain. Justice, the number 11, marks the halfway point between the major arcana. How's that for well-balanced? So there's a lot of explanation in the booklet, not the little white book, but the smaller book that comes along with the deck, on why the symbolism is picked for here. And it does make more sense once you read that. And because these cards are so different, this book comes in great handy for understanding them. Now, let's clear for the last half of the major arcana. And continue. We have the Hanged Man, which is another scarecrow hanging upside down. Now you've got the legs in the shape of a 4, which is very traditional in this particular card. Crows on either side, representing it's either crows or ravens. Nope, those are crows. Representing some sort of sacrifice. Not sure about the little heads on the bottom. Yeah, okay. Then again. And here we have the next card, which is Death, which is typically a card of change when it comes to most tarot decks. And here you have lots of death symbols. You've got the skeleton, you've got the death moth in the corner, you've got an ankh in the middle, but you also have sunflowers, and you have a can, and you have growing pumpkins in the bottom, and a vulture up here. So you've got these symbols of both life and death in the death card. A good representation. And Temperance makes me happy. Why? Well, because I'm a witch. So Temperance is, of course, a witch who is balancing out these potions with a cauldron and trying to measure things in appropriate measurement. So I feel like as a card, using this sort of imagery is just dead perfect when it comes to Temperance. It's completely different from what you would normally find, but I feel like it works. Like many of the other cards, it's alternative symbolism, sort of modernized, but still has much of the same meaning. And we have our Devil card. She's fun. And you have to realize, of course, that the Devil card, or the Great Horned God in other decks, is always one of these cards that wigs people out, just as much as, say, the Death card does. But this one is a devil in a blue dress, which is a reference to a song I'm hoping some of you actually remember. And it makes it kind of more fun, even if she is, like, got chained naked babies. Now that I'm thinking of this, I guess we do have some nudity in this deck. Now that I'm looking at this card, I'm realizing that. Who could easily pull the collars off of their throats? And the first one looks like he's just about to anyway. So, if you're going to sort of soften that particular card, I feel like they did it in a good manner. They made it sort of fun instead of over the top terrifying, as many people feel like that. And I love, of course, the Tower card. They've got haunted house, super spooky, and you've got the top bit being blown off by a electric strike, and it looks sort of like a crown that's coming off the top of it. Of course, any sort of old haunted house may need to come down, for it is stagnant and not full of dead things, more than living things. So again, Tower card, usually some sort of shocking sweeping away of something old and familiar, but then again, it's a much needed change. Again, really good symbolism to have. And here we have the star, and you've got a gargoyle. And I'm not really sure about the symbolism, so I'm going to take a look at the book. And again, I love this because I can. The card is the calm after the storm of the Tower, revealing the understanding, optimism, and renewal that are made possible after the Tower rips away false, less than noble attachments. The light of the star card illuminates spiritual and mental processes in the absence of ego. In the night sky are large star-shaped sun and 7 smaller stars representing the 7 stars of the planets, representing 7 of the planets and the natural cycles of time. So what does a gargoyle have to do with this? The traditional card shows a young one pouring water into the ground, suggesting harmony between watery spiritualism and earthy materialism. Gargoyles were originally built into cathedrals as water spouts to channel rain away from the buildings. In fact, the origin of the word gargoyle is the French, I can't pronounce that word, but it means to gargle. This Notre Dame gargoyle calls to mind the nurturing empress, the mother of nature, channeling the waters of life and the subconsciousness into material earth, or in this case, the village. The rain from the sky is being returned to the ground, will continue to do its natural cycle. In this peaceful Halloween scene, the clock approaches the 13th hour, indicating certain timelessness beneath the icy mountains of abstract thought. So, that's how this connects to the star. Star pours water from one into like a channel, and so do gargoyles. See, if it didn't have this big beautiful book with all these explanations, I don't think this deck would be as meaningful. And we have a moon card, and we have a werewolf. Much, of course, of werewolf lore and so on and so forth, and literature delves around the fact that there's this sort of inner beast inside of us that is waiting to come out. And the moon card is very much that deeper subconscious darkness. So to have the werewolf representation here is just dead perfect. Here we have the sun card. You've got a sleeping 2-headed monster with sunflowers and the sun in the background, and it is a glorious, beautiful morning after Halloween card. And here we have Judgment, again with the vampires, sort of this eternal life sort of feel with some mummy looking people beneath him. I'm gonna look up this symbolism as well because I feel like I'm not sure what they meant here. Awakened sleeper is the real message of this card. Strong signal to shake yourself out of any current ruts up in your eyes and get on with things. If you're figuratively buried under grief, shame, past errors, or a broken heart, it's clearly time to start fresh, forgiving yourself and others. So, again, pretty good set of symbolism for that card. But you really need to take a look at the book if you're going to understand all the symbolism from this deck. It's not as familiar, I guess, as the Rider Waite. And here we have the World card. You've got the cat, the black cat that's been going through all the cards in the middle. And you have the symbols around the outside. It's very similar in many ways to the standard World card, except you have bones and roots and vines, instead of sort of this cosmo-y feel to it. Sort of a very grounded world card. Alright, so there you have the major arcana. I'll go through a couple of the minor, and then we should be good. Like I said, I really love this deck. I love the feel of it. And tonight, of course, I realized that there's actually nudity here, but it's in the double card, and it's tiny babies. Itty bitty penis. So, I feel like that of all things is, I guess, a little easier to deal with than, say, some of the other decks, which are a little bit more graphic. So, I'm going to show you some of the suits. Because much of the same imagery that you would have in a regular minor arcana and a Rider-Waite shows up here fairly easy. Like the Three of Swords is Three of Bats, and you've got 3 bats biting onto a heart. It's very much like the Three of Swords, where you have 3 swords sticking into a heart. So when it comes to the minor arcana, the imagery is pretty similar. Doesn't change a whole lot, except for the fact that you have bats and pumpkins instead of what we would normally consider the symbolism in the majors, in the minor arcana. So we'll go over pentacles or pumpkins in just a second. But you've got this royal purple in all of the royalty cards. Here you've got some more red in the imps / staves, and they still have staves in these cards, although I don't know. Do you have this one here? I don't see. Yeah, there's no staves in the knight, but there's staves in the other ones. And here, of course, you still have swords in these. This one, instead of a sword, has a flag or banner. I don't see a sword in the Page of Bats. Anyway, and here you still have quite a bit of water in the symbolism for the ghosts. So, a lot of the same imagery shows up. Wait, I messed this up. I guess I had you out of order. There you go. I think probably one of my favorite cards in this whole deck is in the Pentacle suit. And I will show that to you in just a second. And of course you have King of Pentacles, which is this sort of similar imagery that you had. And I love the fact that the Page of Pentacles is essentially Wednesday Addams. But there is a card, the Six of Pumpkins, which is a woman giving out stuff to a beggar. And in this deck, you have a woman in costume giving out candy to these kids. And this is essentially the same idea, people coming to the door and asking you for something, but giving them a measured amount in return. And I feel like this is why I love this deck. This is an image that people will understand, people will get. And it makes more sense to us today than, say, giving alms to beggars, which doesn't happen anymore, even if the symbolism does show up in the decks. I feel like this deck is more grounded in like a current reality, even though it is silly with imps and ghosts in a manner of speaking. I feel like some of the images that come through and how they're translated are most certainly much more understandable than, say, some of the Rider-Waite symbolism, which is kind of medieval, to be honest. So, this is the Halloween Tarot deck and book set. Our cute little box with, of course, my favorite card on the back. And it has some standard layouts, although their Celtic cross is slightly different than I've ever seen. And they have some explanations for some different 3 card spreads. Like past, present, future, which is pretty typical. Dilemma, choice 1, choice 2. Hope, fear, opposition. So they've got some good insights for actually throwing cards and using this as a deck. So I hope you liked this video. Comment, let me know how you like this deck, what you thought of this video, what could be improved, and so on and so forth. And I hope that you can appreciate that not all tarot decks have to be super serious or super graphic, and that something like this, which is a little bit more cartoony, definitely has a place in the world of tarot. Have a good night, and I will see you guys in the next video.